Hello, everyone. It's really my pleasure to welcome you to Bridging the Gap, Forging Networks to Address Gender Data Gaps. This is an interactive panel discussion co-hosted by Data2X and UN Women. My name is Dilly Severin, and I am the Director of Advocacy and Communications at Data2X, and I will be your moderator today. Before we get started and before I introduce our illustrious panelists, I just wanted to quickly go over the format of today's event, as well as some logistics.
Recording in progress.
So we have just about an hour together. The program will consist of some quick opening remarks, followed by a moderated panel discussion, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers from the audience. This event is being live streamed over the World Data Forum official platform. And so we encourage you to post your questions through the platform. I'll show you how to do that briefly, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible when we get to the Q&A portion of the session. Natalie, can you go to the next slide so I can quickly show the platform? So if you're logged into the platform, which you should be to be able to tune into the event, this is what your screen will look like. So to ask a question, please make sure that you look to the right-hand side where you'll see the chat box, enter your question and press the blue ask button to submit. During the event, we encourage you to tweet and share, and otherwise, keep the conversation going also on social media using the hashtag gender data. So I will go ahead and introduce the panelists. I have the honor of introducing our panelists today, who are all deep experts in the field of gender data. In the interest of time, I will only say names and titles and organizations, but we're happy to provide more information to our panelists later. First, of course, it's my pleasure to introduce Emily Corey-Pryor, the Executive Director of Data2X, Emma Theory, the Gender Data Specialist at the Zambia Statistics Agency, Eric Swanson, Director of Research at Open Data Watch, Jessamine Encarnacion, the Interregional Advisor on Statistics and Women Count Data and Statistics Lead at UN Women, Lauren Harrison, the Data Ecosystems Lead at Paris 21, Muchiri Nyaga, the Executive Director of the Local Development Research Institute, and Sarah Bunker, the Data Fellow at the Gender Group at the World Bank. Welcome to our panelists, and really excited to have a rousing discussion. So with that, I will now turn over to Emily, Executive Director of Data2X, to open the session with some brief remarks. Over to you, Emily.
Great, thank you so much, Dilly, and hello, everyone. As Dilly said, my name is Emily Corey-Pryor, and I'm Executive Director of Data2X. We're a civil society organization and global gender data alliance that works every day to build the case and mobilize action for gender data through research, advocacy, communications, and innovative partnerships. Thank you so much for joining us today. The topic of partnerships is one I'm very excited to be speaking with you about, not only because collaboration is central to Data2X's mission and has been since our inception, but also because due to the pandemic, as well as multiple overlapping social, economic, geopolitical crises, we're living in a moment where the need for durable multi-stakeholder partnerships is more urgent than ever. It's no wonder then that the recent landmark report from the UN Secretary General was aptly titled Our Common Agenda and emphasized the power of partnership, global solidarity, and multilateralism to ensure the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and to overcome the greatest challenges we're facing. So how does all of this intersect with gender data? You all know that there are 51 gender-specific indicators across the SDGs, and even before the COVID-19 pandemic, most countries did not have enough data to monitor their progress. For example, more than 3/4 of the data on these indicators is more than a decade old, and 60% of countries don't have data available to measure progress against SDG 5. Part of the problem is that we need more funding for gender data. In our recent report with Open Data Watch, we estimated that we face a funding gap of $450 million per year for core gender data systems. And since the onset of the pandemic, most statistics offices in low and lower middle income countries have reported a reduced ability to meet international reporting requirements, and more than half of national statistics offices have experienced budget cuts, hampering their effectiveness. There are also unique regional gaps and challenges. But there is a way forward. Earlier this year, the Generation Equality Forum mobilized unprecedented momentum around gender equality, generating approximately 1,100 commitments and $40 billion from government, civil society, donors, and private companies. We must maintain the driving force behind this collective action. Doing so will require our willingness to use different tools and to form new kinds of regional, national, and cross-sectoral partnerships to overcome gender data challenges. Partnerships like the Gender Data Network, founded by Data2X in collaboration with Open Data Watch and the UN Economic Commission for Africa in 2019. Regionally, the network seeks to improve gender data production and to better link it with demand, and to encourage gender data use among participating countries. The network has fostered sharing of information and best practices among countries, raised the profile of members, and created a platform for understanding challenges and exploring innovative solutions. At the national level, partnerships between governments, data producers, and civil society have yielded important progress on gender data. For example, in Uruguay, through a combination of quality data collection and advocacy efforts, the government created a national care policy to address the unpaid care work burden experienced disproportionately by women. In doing so, stakeholders reconceptualized care as a collective and societal issue and demonstrated how data-informed policy decisions can reduce the care burden. At the methodological level, digital data is helping us understand everything from online harassment to the differential mobility of women and men to how gendered violence on public transit affects school choice. And although issues of privacy and security must be addressed, data collaboratives between public and private sectors are a promising model of collaboration to generate policy-relevant gender data. We must fund gender data, use gender data, and harness the power of big data to fill gender data policy gaps. And we need to continue to advocate for gender data, not only as a solution for gender equality, but as a development solution as well. We can't achieve the Sustainable Development Goals if the data we choose to collect and use and prioritize does not include all of us. There is much work to do, but it is my strongest belief that if we approach it together in partnership, we can shape a new and stronger foundation to build forward better. Thank you so much for being with us today, and I can't wait to hear the comments from our panelists.
Thank you so much, Emily, for those opening remarks and for really crystallizing the core themes of today's panel, really focusing on that imperative that you gave us around partnerships and those partnerships at the cross-sectoral, national, regional level, and the importance of new collaboratives and tools and methodologies for filling the gender data gaps that you highlighted. So let's just dive right into our discussion. Jessamine, I wonder if I can turn to you first. And I would love if you could kick us off with just an overview of UN Women's work on the newly released Counted and Visible Toolkit. And as you do so, I'm wondering if you can tell us how your partnership with the Intersecretariat Working Group on Household Surveys fostered the creation of the toolkit. How can that enable greater in-country capacity?
Thank you, Dilly, for that great question. But first, I want to say hello to everyone. Thank you for joining this session. And in Dilly's question, she mentioned about the Counted and Visible Toolkit. Some of you may not know yet, but UN Women, through our Global Gender Data Program, Women Count, has released earlier this year the Counted and Visible Toolkit. So this is a resource that provides tools and mechanisms aimed at supporting countries as they produce disaggregated gender statistics. So I will respond to you, Dilly, in 3 parts. Next slide, please. First, partnerships. When we were first planning the production of disaggregated gender data. So we partnered with first the Interagency Expert Group on SDG indicators. They have identified disaggregated, next please, can you click on everything? Thank you. So the disaggregated gender statistics needed to respond to the information needs on policy priorities for women and girls. And then on the other hand, the Intersecretariat Working Group on Household Surveys, they are aimed at exhausting available data for SDG monitoring. And then we at UN Women is undertaking the Women Count program, supporting countries to making sure that every woman and girl count in SDG monitoring. So bonded by this shared goal and objective of producing disaggregated gender statistics and addressing gender data gaps, we produce the Counted and Visible Toolkit. Next slide, please. Now, secondly, partnerships. Partnerships in terms of the content of the toolkit, how we have highlighted partnerships and networking as very important in addressing data gaps. So aside, of course, from producing or sharing how-tos on producing disaggregated gender statistics, statistical methodologies, estimation methodologies, we are also equally highlighting the must-dos to ensure that, you know, this activity is not simply a one-off statistical exercise, but rather partnerships that can be sustained and institutionalized. So first, there's a need for high-level commitment from the NSS leadership, particularly from the major gender data producer, which is the NSO, and the major gender data user, which is the Ministry of Women. So a case that we have highlighted is Cameroon, wherein under the leadership of both parties, they have formed an interagency committee on gender statistics. And as a result, it directed the formulation of a multi-year program on gender statistics to address gender data gaps. And no less than their government is actually funding this own Women Count program with $700,000 for the past 2 years. Next is on prioritizing which gender equality indicators should be produced and by which dimensions. So this is should not be done unilaterally. So we have highlighted the case of Uganda, for example, wherein they have had multi-stakeholder consultations in identifying their priority gender equality indicators. So they started in 2016, updated it in 2019. And as a result, like, you know, in their first VNR or voluntary national review, they had only 11 gender indicators to monitor progress on gender equality. But in 2020, in their VNR, they now have 28 gender indicators monitoring progress, a 150% jump in 2020 as a result of this collaborative effort. And lastly, on advocacy and use, it cannot be overemphasized that this process should be user-oriented and not product-oriented. So for example, we have highlighted an example of Colombia, wherein they partnered with media, particularly, and other development partners. And no less than the Vice President of Colombia has launched the report and now is being institutionalized in the country to produce annually and subnational reports. Next slide, please. Last slide. And lastly, now that we have produced the toolkit, we are now partnering with other actors in promoting the toolkit to our target users. So aside from the global partners, we are partnering with the Regional Commission in Africa, as well as the African Development Bank, in conducting a training to capacitate users in producers in producing disaggregated gender statistics. At the national level, we're looking at partnerships with Tanzania and Indonesia to capacitate them on small area estimation so that they can produce disaggregated gender statistics. And lastly, we at UN Women, we are also working within the house to work with other colleagues who have produced similar products so that we can, for our constituents to maximize its utility. So bottom line, we want and aim to borrow strength from each other. And that, I think, is really the true partnership that we should always advocate for, that all of us are borrowing strength from each other towards a shared goal. Thank you, and over to you, Dili.
Thanks, Jessamine. I'm going to start using this phrase in my life, borrowing strength from each other. I think that is the best way to really describe partnerships. I wonder, Eric, to continue on this theme of borrowing strength, particularly as we look at the intersection between sort of regional collaboration and UN bodies, I wonder if you can tell us more about the exciting work at the regional level that Open Data Watch is undertaking in partnership with Data2X, which actually this kind of work gave rise to the report, which is the sort of namesake of the panel today, Bridging the Gap. Can you talk more about how did partnerships with UN regional bodies produce greater technical insights in the report series, and just inspire further collaboration or lending of strength in Jessamyn's words?
Yes, Dilly, thank you. Our partnership with regional organizations and in some cases directly with national statistics offices has been a very important part of the Bridging the Gap studies. So I am Eric Swanson. I'm Director of Research at Open Data Watch, and Open Data Watch is a non-governmental organization that works at the intersection of open data and official statistics. For the last 5 years, we've been a partner with Data2X, working to make gender data more widely available. The Bridging the Gap project was undertaken by Data2X and Open Data Watch to document gaps in gender data. We knew from earlier work by Myra Buvenitz and others at Data2X that there are persistent gaps in important categories of gender data, including indicators of women's health, education, and economic status. In the Bridging the Gap studies, we worked with regional partners in Africa, Latin America, and Asia and the Pacific to identify gaps in official statistics of 25 countries and in the international databases, such as the SDG database for the same countries. The purpose of these studies was not to rank countries, and we're not constructing a global index. We recognize our sample was not necessarily representative of all countries. We do, however, hope that our methodology and our findings can be useful to countries as they develop plans for filling some of those gaps. The results should also be useful to regional and international organizations and NGOs that work in partnership with national statistics offices to increase the availability and use of gender data. Let me give you a very brief overview of our findings. Looking at 68 SDG indicators that can and should be sex disaggregated, we found that 32% were not available at all, 18% were available but lacked sex disaggregated data, leaving only half of the 68 indicators that were generally available in most countries with sex disaggregation. Among the available indicators, we also found that 60% of the most recent observations were 3 years or more old. International databases have similar gaps. In this work, we also wanted to understand how data are being used to support gender policies. And with the help of our colleagues in ECLAC in Latin America and SCAP in Asia and the Pacific, we reviewed the most recent policy or strategy documents in 10 countries. We found many cases where policy formation and monitoring could make better use of available gender data and would be further strengthened by filling gaps in the missing data. Clearly, there's still much work to do. So we look forward to continuing our work with national statistics offices and their partners to strengthen the production and use of gender data. We know that national statistics systems want to provide good quality data to contribute to evidence-based policies and to help countries achieve the SDGs. We also know that many countries will need technical and financial assistance to reach their goals for their statistical systems. This will require strong partnerships with international and regional organizations, with non-governmental organizations, and between countries themselves. And I believe in the next presentation, you'll hear more about the Gender Data Network, which is building exactly these kinds of partnerships. So thank you. And of course, if there are questions, happy to receive those in the chat later. Back to you, Dilly.
Thanks, Eric, so much for highlighting the important findings of the Bridging the Gap report. Half of the necessary 68 indicators is pretty startling. So clearly there's much to do. I want to turn now to Emma, who I think can speak right to the heart of this, given that she is working with the Zambia statistics function. So Emma, welcome. I wonder if you could talk to us as a member of the Gender Data Network, which Eric referenced, which is that initiative of Data2X, Open Data Watch, UNECA, and Paris 21. In your experience, and reflecting on some of the gaps that Eric flagged, how can networks facilitate that sort of cross-country and cross-regional learning to fill gender data gaps and increase the priority of gender data, particularly in a resource-constrained environment?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon. Sharing my experience coming from Zambia has been that as a member of the Africa Gender Data Network, indeed, there's a lot that we've learned as a statistical office. That is an holistic approach on how we can bridge the data gaps. So let me start by mentioning some of the gender data gaps that is currently existing in our country, and just like any other African countries, we do have gaps in health sector, labor sector, economic sector, to mention a few. So with being a member of this gender data networking, it has really benefited me as an individual as well as an office, in that through exchange of experiences, we've been able to sharpen each other. Because with the networking is helping to bridge the data gaps, in that we are able to learn one or two things from others. Was the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenge is the use of the administrative data. Administrative data has got its own consequences, in that each stakeholder institution, they've got different methodologies they use to collect the administrative data. The other challenge, because it's administrative data, you would find that there's no uniformity. And when the statistics are not uniform, then it poses a challenge of them not being comparable. You cannot compare them. Then there's even no standard in terms of the data collection process, vis-a-vis even the lack of gender disaggregation. But with the coming up of this important network comprising of 15 countries, it has really gave us an opportunity as Zambia even to be part and parcel of the bridging the gap mapping exercise that was done. So with that, we were able to coming off together, partnering with others, that gave us comfort. So in this case, this networking, they actually promote uniformity, in that there's need to sit the way we did even the mapping exercise. You'd find that starting with the variables, use of concepts, all those things were to be agreed upon. And in this case, we are not looking at national concepts alone, but we are talking of regional, if we're to compare with other African countries where we are part and parcel of the networking system. Then the same networks, they actually stimulate the usage of data in development goals, like Eric has alluded to. It's not just talking about equality, but we should also think beyond equality. In this case, I'll emphasize on development. So I would say that networking has really brought sanity, has really brought a lot of other ideas on how we can bridge the gender gaps that exist. And in conclusion, I would say that it's the best way to go, because it brings about 5 desirable features, which is quality, coverage, standard, complexity, as well as the granularity. So I would say I want to thank so much the networking because we are a viable team doing things with one voice, or we have one common goal of bridging the gender gaps.
Thank you so much, Emma. I'm really excited about these ways that our panelists are encapsulating our themes today: sanity, quality, coverage, standards, complexity, and granularity. Beautiful. So I'm gonna turn over now to Lauren. We've been hearing about regional collaboration with UN agencies, and Emma just really aptly laid out some of the challenges in terms of comparability of data and more. I think maybe funding is now the elephant in the room. And wondering if you can talk a bit about how your work with Paris 21 on the newly launched Clearinghouse for Financing Development Data in partnership with the Bern Network and others is working to address some of these issues. And in your view specifically, how can donors better coordinate and advocate with their country partners to prioritize gender data? And how can the Clearinghouse support these efforts?
Well, thanks so much, Dilly. It's really a delight to be with a number of our network partners here in this session. Paris 21 is the Partnership in Statistics for Development in the 21st Century. We're a global partnership hosted by the OECD. And so really talking about networks is really at the core of kind of how we see ourselves and how we like to work. So this is a really timely and appreciated conversation to have. Specifically to your question, yes, definitely financing is the elephant in the room. Gender equality is a cross-cutting issue in statistical development, which I think really introduces a unique challenge for mobilizing and ultimately monitoring financing. On the one hand, mainstreaming gender across a wide range of projects introduces many entry points to increase the financing envelope. However, this more diffuse approach is difficult to track and tends to leave system-wide investments to strengthen the whole gender data value chain through core systems investments really chronically under-resourced and underfunded. So the newly launched Bern Network Clearinghouse for Financing Development Data introduces a platform for countries and donors to grapple with this challenge in a few key ways. First, by really shining a spotlight on the issue. The Clearinghouse brings together data and insights from multiple sources to raise the visibility of the current state of play in gender data financing. For example, the Clearinghouse includes our new Paris 21 2021 press data set from our partner report on support for statistics, which reveals a continuing downward and stagnating trend in ODA dedicated to gender data, from a high of 76 million in 2017 to less than half that number in 2019, as you'll see on the Clearinghouse. Cumulatively, the top donors have contributed just over 200 million in investments for core gender data and dedicated with a primary sort of purpose related to gender statistics since the launch of the SDGs. But as highlighted by our colleagues at Data2X and Open Data Watch, we know that the needs are more than double that number annually. That said, we know that ODA commitments from key donors are not the whole story on gender data financing. There are other players and entry points to help close that gap, but we need a networked approach. So by integrating these data sources in a unified dynamic platform, the Clearinghouse Gender Channel serves as a one-stop shop to unpack some of these dynamics. So the second way that the Bern Network Clearinghouse really can help on this issue is by demystifying those financing needs and flows. So the Clearinghouse is designed to unpack key trends and understand how the gender data financing landscape is evolving over time. For example, again, based on press data, we can see that gender data is often overwhelmingly financed by a few key donors. And these are real champions that have really changed the state of play in terms of gender data financing. However, it also, having really a concentration among a few key donors can ultimately threaten the sustainability of already scarce resources. The Clearinghouse brings together this supply side data with new demand side insights from countries, which is really, I think, quite exciting and a real game changer. So we've worked with a number of countries to really bring in some in-depth country insights, but we've looked at essentially how gender data financing needs are captured in the statistical strategies and their corresponding budgets to see how gender data financing needs are structured at the country level. Thus, the clearinghouse really provides a starting point for more targeted dialogue around strategic investments in gender data and statistics. Third and finally, the clearinghouse provides a platform for learning. Bringing these diffuse insights together in the clearinghouse ultimately offers an opportunity for us to develop a greater understanding of the dynamics and the results of gender data financing globally, regionally, and nationally. For example, the clearinghouse monitors the schedule of gender data production alongside financing insights, which sets the stage for ongoing efforts to better understand how financing translates to more and better gender data. It also provides tools to facilitate dialogue and communication between stakeholders. So the clearinghouse is really an invitation to build a community around gender data financing with stakeholders from across the globe. This version of the clearinghouse is really the first fully functional prototype, and it's just the beginning. It's designed to show the art of the possible. And we're so excited to engage with Data2X, with Open Data Watch, with new partners and stakeholders to enrich the platform in the months to come. So we invite you to check out the clearinghouse at smartdatafinance.org. And there was a session also earlier today with more information and more speakers where you can learn more about the clearinghouse project. Thanks so much. Back over to you, Dilly.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks so much. Please, everyone, do check out the clearinghouse. I'm going to turn now to Muchiri to sort of build on some of these themes that Lauren has highlighted, particularly around matching the supply side with the demand side and really looking at the needs at the country level. So Muchiri, you lead a team of data users at LDRI, focused on addressing inequality in the African Union. As a data user, what kind of partnerships have you found to be effective in bridging the gap between data and policy? And can you speak to what you see as the unique role of civil society in this effort?
Thank you, Dilly, and thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Let me start with a saying that I choose to believe is an African saying. It feels particularly African to me. And it says that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go with others. I like the saying because it really speaks to the potential for partnerships and what those could mean for the various problems we're trying to solve. So I'm hoping my internet holds up. It's been a bit problematic. But at LDRI, we are organized into two main practice areas. We look at transparency, accountability, and good governance within one practice, mostly very democracy and governance focused. And of course, we look at food and nutrition security as a separate practice area. And of course, both of these incorporate problems that Africa faces across the board, but that should not be approached in a gender-blind manner. So we've had the privilege of working with state actors and colleagues within the non-state constituency for the last 5-6 years, trying to move the needle on access to data for decision-making and better accountability. And I think over that time, we've kind of gathered some insights on which kinds of levers have real traction and which ones tend to be spring-loaded, meaning they just bounce right back to where they were, and which ones are made of soft rubber. Much as you tag on them, nothing's going to happen. And in our view, good partnerships have been those real levers, those levers with real traction. And my observations over the last few years, I think they fall under two, the incentives and what makes a good partnership really form and stick, formed under like two main buckets of issues. And of course, these two they provide an entry point to getting people around the table and beginning that journey of mutual trust and respect that allows for the work to expand and go beyond where it started. So the first kind of partnership that I'll talk about is what I call good common ground partnerships. Right. So common ground partnerships are like SDGs. We have gender relevant or gender specific indicators and issues across the entire framework. We have a specific goal 5. And these allow people to come around in a frame and a structure that everyone understands. And that becomes a departure point, and people can work from there. A lot of this has already been litigated, it's been argued, it's been agreed. And so where people are starting at the national level is already common ground. And so this common ground allows people to come together in ways that would not be possible under normal circumstances. For instance, in Kenya, we see the SDG Kenya Forum, which is a collective of civil society organizations. Even for non-state actors, having that common ground becomes a point of coalition. By the time it becomes a multi-stakeholder effort, the public sector is already seeing a value proposition and an opportunity to advance the policy agenda of the administration, etc. So I've seen in Kenya and a few other countries, those kinds of coalitions, getting invited by government to sit at the table and co-create and forming these national multi-stakeholder initiatives. And for me, that's a good entry point and a start. The SDGs are one good example. The Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program from a food security side of work is another. That you see a lot of work that's been brought together, non-state actors, academia, private sector even, to work on advancing issues on data for decision making. I see an additional example, actually a couple of good examples from the health sector. The Primary Healthcare Performance Initiative has been very useful in creating these national collectives of individuals working on primary healthcare. The Joint Learning Network, is similar, and with a lot of work and core groups at the national level that have both state or non-state actors. They all started with, the healthcare specific issues, but have now also adopted data agendas along the way. The health data collaborative, an interesting emergence coming from the same actors who formed PHCPI, who formed JLN, who formed a lot of other areas, and now working with a country presence to kind of advance the data agenda. So that's common ground, a very good place to start. But then there's also the opportunistic place to start, which I'm sure we are all seeing and have seen in the last year and a half, 2 years. And this is your common pain partnerships. All the work that's been done around bringing people together on COVID, but now specifically working on issues such as gender-based violence, which escalated exponentially in many parts of the world because of the COVID response measures that countries put in. So that for me is a common pain area, the public sector, governments working together, making data more available, where before there was mistrust and suspicion. Now you're seeing, a lot of partners willing to put those things aside, the government side becoming less nervous about making data available and being a whole lot more honest about how bad the situation is and asking for help. So common pain is an area where I'm sure we're all seeing, and this, for me, are really good examples of places to start, and also platforms on which we can build and grow on. And I'm sure, Data2X and Open Data Watch could provide numerous examples of those kinds of frameworks and some of the real benefits those have had in our countries over time. So these aligned pain relationships and partnerships are not new. I think we saw that, especially the Ebola, in 2014, private sector stepping in and making data that is still, for the most part, impossible to get, available for researchers, innovators, public sector actors to make decisions with. And I think the biggest value proposition across the board is what civil society is able to do when it comes to the use, the reuse, the repackaging, the redistribution of this data, the network on the ground, and the ability to communicate the insights in the language that makes most sense for grassroots actors. I think is a skill set that is greatly way more represented in the civil society than it is in the public sector, and that's where some of these partnerships really find great value. So I'll stop there before seeing the praises of my non-state actor colleagues any further. But just to say, at the Africa Open Data Network, which is a program run by LDRI, these are some of the objectives that we have, to catalyze these kinds of collaborations, catalyze research, new innovation, bring people together to really identify those good levers and tag on them and keep them tagged until the job is done. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Machiri. And I love the idea of the common pain as a motivator. I've never heard that before. I know we often coalesce around like a common agenda like the SDGs, but I think your insights on COVID, Ebola, and more, and how that common pain can be used to motivate action are really, really powerful. Of course, in addition to your reflections on the specific maybe dynamism of civil society and sort of repackaging that information for use. So thank you so much for highlighting that. Sarah, rounding us off, talking about use and tools and innovations, maybe we can end the discussion with you talking with us a bit about the products of partnership to generate effective tools. So can you tell us about the World Bank's updated gender data portal and how it might be used as a tool to foster expanded collaboration and networks?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Dilly. We're really excited to show some of the things coming to the gender data portal. As most of our panelists have already mentioned, it truly takes collaborative efforts to bridge the gaps. And we've kept this in mind as we've been revamping to serve the different audiences. So the World Bank Gender Data Portal has over 900 country-level gender statistics. And while it's been used by economists and gender specialists, including many of you connected today, we understand that to spark policy discussions and reform, we really must go beyond this and make sure that the data and information on gender gaps and data availability are more accessible to key partners like civil society organizations, advocacy networks, journalists, and of course, policymakers. The revamp focuses on how this tool can strengthen the bridge with those stakeholders while also being useful for users who might not have an extensive background in data or gender. The changes to the portal are centered around making it easier to navigate, explore, and share the data, particularly through improvement of the portal's user friendliness, so users could actually find the wealth of data and resources that live on the portal, the ability to download and share all the data and content so that it's easy to repurpose and kind of copy and paste an image into presentations or an article, or attach a PDF to an annex of a report. Visuals, since those are easier to comprehend most times than a data table with lots of numbers. And lastly, narratives and stories that explain the trends and gaps and why they are so important to act upon. So I'll show you a quick before and after look of the portal. The current country dashboards that we have few visualizations and data points with no explanatory text, and they don't lend themselves to being able to be downloaded or shared, neither the images nor the data. So that's not as helpful for collaboration across partners and organizations. So we've transformed these into these interactive country profiles that can be downloaded into PDFs with narratives that explain how a country is progressing on key indicators compared to their region or income group averages, or compared to other countries within their same region. These are just an example of some of the visualizations I have here for you, but there are also snapshots of the country's data availability across topics. This type of overview is helpful and useful for collaborators as they're discussing their priorities for implementing or financing gender programs or data collection efforts. Another new narrative component are the data stories. So you'll see here that this is an adolescent fertility data story that kind of walks users through the global and regional trends and highlights progress in certain countries, while also explaining how early childbearing is connected to child marriage, education, and eventual employment outcomes. These types of data stories really serve as an entry point for different targeted audiences in understanding the data and the contributing factors or consequences of gender gaps. Going beyond this kind of overview level of gender data and gaps, organizations with a sectoral focus or campaigns and partnerships focusing on making progress on a particular indicator can do more in-depth exploration using the new visualization tools. You can map the data or gender gap across all available countries, chart the trends, and customize the comparator countries or aggregates. There is also a data table dynamic to each view that you can download the data for the selections that you've made. And you can also select all countries within an income group level or a region to compare for total male, female data, or you can just focus on female data as well. And lastly, you'll see here that there is an option to correlate indicators with any of the other indicators that are in the database as well. So these are just some of the functions of the new visualization tools that we have on the gender data portal, which lend themselves to a lot of collaboration among different organizations. Lastly, beyond all these efforts, our team also engages closely with other stakeholders and partners, including all of those on the panel today, to make sure that the links on the latest efforts are up to date on the portal. So we hope that providing the latest guidelines, data collection and measurement efforts, lists of all existing gender data portals, NSO sites with gender pages that are available online, et cetera, really enable users to learn about who is working in this space so that they can connect with them to form new partnerships. So with that, I will close and we'll move into the Q&A section. But really, if you're interested in viewing the gender data portal more and providing feedback on how it would work best for your network and partnerships, please do reach out. My email address is here, and I can also hopefully drop it in the chat or the Q&A in the registration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that great overview of the gender data portal. And I think it speaks to many of the issues that our panelists have raised in terms of needs for data and more. So thank you so much for highlighting that. With that, we're gonna turn now to audience Q&A, and some have been coming fast and furious in the chat. So thanks again to our panelists for their great insight. So maybe to jump right into the audience questions. For the first one, I wonder if Jessamine, you can speak to this question. So one of our audience members asked, can any of the panelists speak to the readiness of countries to be focused on gender data? I wonder if we need to focus on increasing the perceived importance of these data before the capacity to analyze and use them. Jessamine, any thoughts here?
Yeah, thank you, Dili, and thank you for the participant who asked this question. Just to say that, yes, a specific case in point, the Women Count program, the way we're now developing the second phase of the program, we recognize that countries would have different levels of maturity of gender statistics development. Thus, no one size fits all in the kind of support that we give to countries. Now we have tried to categorize based on consultations with our field colleagues as well as with our national partners, 5 levels of maturity, wherein we factored in, most importantly, the level of political commitment and the readiness of the environment on investing on resources, not necessarily financial, but equally important, time and human resources on this agenda. So now, as we go into the second phase of Women Count program starting next year, we have looked at partnerships in implementing the levels of maturity, whether it be vertical, where you see North-South or South-South partnerships of countries sharing best practices, and likewise horizontally, knowing that within the same level of maturity, there are other strengths that other countries can borrow from. Over.
Thanks so much, Jessamine. Maybe for the next question, we can turn to Emma. So Emma, we have a question from the audience about the Gender Data Network. And the question is the Gender Data Network also working on how to use gender disaggregated data to produce analysis? The participant says some countries have quite good gender disaggregated data from one database that they can merge with another, but some opportunities are sometimes missed. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yes, thank you for that question. And my response is that yes, it is actually working. And even for Zambia, I can testify. We have an annual report called the Gender Status Report. So like the one we just released on the 10th of August, 2021, it has really been given a new facelift, different from the other versions. And this is because of the knowledge that we've acquired from the networking and also other trainings that we've also attended in country in terms of gender analysis. It has really helped us to present the statistics in the manner they're supposed to be presented.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Emma. Eric, I wonder if you could take the next question. So one of the questions is about policy relevant indicators. And I'm sorry, I don't know why I lost the question. Oh, there we go. Okay, so can you please talk more about policy relevant gender data? Is there an example of an indicator that was a data gap previously that is now being used to inform policy changes by governments?
An excellent question, and I don't have a favorite indicator to nominate right now. As I said in my talk, we found gaps across a wide range of topics. One of the areas that we were concerned about is the environment, which is not normally thought of as being a gender domain, if you will, but in fact, environmental effects have a huge impact on women and of course men as well. But particularly in the built environment, for example, we know that women and children are more likely to suffer from indoor air pollution. We also know that the ability to produce food is a task that falls on many women, mostly on women in many cases. And so the quality of the environment, the productivity of farms, and indeed control over the assets of farms are all very important policy relevant indicators that need to be strengthened in many countries. So I'm afraid that's not a positive message in the sense of saying, oh yes, here's one that wasn't available before and now it is. But what we do know is that there are important policy issues that hang on the availability of these data. We are hoping that where they are available, they're being used. We did find, as I said in my talk, also as one of the other panelists said, I think Machuri said, a gap between policy and data itself. So even having the data doesn't mean that it's being used in policies yet. And that's another task we need to pay attention to. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Eric. For our next question, I wonder maybe if we can turn to Sarah. So we have a question that says, there are so many geographic differences within countries. How can we develop indicators that are relevant not only at the national level, but that can also help us guide local policy interventions? So I'm not sure if the person here means local as in subnational, but any insights you have are really helpful here.
Yes, absolutely. So while the gender data portal focuses mostly on country level, national level statistics, we do know that there are a lot of differences subnationally. And that is also why we partner with the National Statistics offices, as they do a lot of the subnational data collection. And so that is how in the resources section, people can get to that component on our website. But outside of the gender data portal, it really is important to see the disaggregation between urban and rural. And I would like us all, I think we are all asking kind of for a call for more disaggregation of data beyond just sex, because it is really this component of intersectionality that will help create smart policies as well, especially in trying to close the gaps between men and women and girls and boys in a variety of areas in the regions.
Thanks, Sarah. For the next question, which is a pretty big one, I'm wondering if Muchiri and Lauren can tag team on this one from your different perspectives. So this is a top voted question, so no pressure. Can you comment on the best practices and examples of public and private sector initiatives that effectively address the production of sex disaggregated data? Maybe Muchiri, I'll turn to you first since you started to give some of those examples, and maybe Lauren can jump in after.
No, thank you. It's a research heavy question. I think a very good example for me remains there are a couple of good examples. I think definitely one of those is the Africa Agriculture Development Program, CADEP. There are issues for a long time around availability of data, But as countries work towards bringing together bring a multi-stakeholder approach to this, strengthening those sector working groups at the country level, many of them led by the statistics agencies, to kind of make data more available, more usable, more current. I think the appetite began to grow from there, and then a continental effort to bring a peer review to the advancement of agriculture kind of added the necessary fuel we needed to push us over that hump. So if you have time, have a look at the biennial review. It has a very long title, but it's a biennial review on agricultural transformation. And you see the reports, the dashboard, and how countries and their reporting has changed over the 2 cycles that has happened. So I think it's a good example of an effort that's multi-stakeholder and that's advanced the issues of data quite a bit. There's still calls for more data. I think the more we do it, the more we realize how badly off we are on data for agriculture, and this is multi-sectoral, right? So you're going to find health and gender, women's rights, etc., kind of embedded across it. So that's one example.
Thanks so much, Mchiri.
Lauren, help.
No, it's a tough question, and I think it's one where it's frankly still learning, right? I think that the SDGs have also just really kind of illuminated a need to build a community around these issues so that we can all go further together through networks and partnerships. But I mean, speaking from Paris 21, I know one of the ways in kind of a policy level that we see being really critical in this regard and normalizing and standardizing sex disaggregation and gender statistics as a core element of a functioning statistical system is to bring it into the statistical strategy. So this is why we were working in partnership with UN Women on really developing new tools and guidance to enable NSOs to take this on as a core element of a national strategy for the development of statistics. And we piloted this in 9 countries. And there are already countries who were doing this to some degree, and the Gender Data Network has really illuminated a lot of examples. So I think that this is, it's standardizing it as a commitment, that this is something that is a core element. It's a best practice. It's not a special thing that we do sometimes, maybe if we can. It's something that we, and I think we're moving in that direction. I know we call this session the Bridging the Gap, and there are gaps, and it's so important to talk about them. But I think the other thing I would say, and I know a couple of my colleagues have mentioned it, which is that one of the ways you build momentum is through use. And we can do more in terms of communicating and disseminating sex disaggregated data and other gender statistics in ways that policymakers can respond to. And when that happens, there's also increased demand, which ultimately has knock-on effects in terms of creating an enabling environment where gender statistics are treated as an essential core part of a functioning statistical system. So I would say we still have a long ways to go, but it's also learning to empower statistics offices to really use the sex disaggregated data that they have and raise the visibility of it to really kind of jumpstart that virtuous cycle of gender data use. So those are just a few points, I think, from what we've seen with the country partnerships we're working with. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Lauren and Mchiri, for tag teaming on that big question. I'm mindful of time. No, we have 2 minutes left. And so we've gotten a lot of amazing insights from our panelists. I feel like Mchiri, Jessamine, and Emma in particular have thrown down the gauntlet with some really amazing sort of slogans, lending strength, collaborations born out of pain. Also, Emma gave us sort of her 5-word pitch for how collaboration fosters sanity. So for everyone on the panel, my last question, and it's a great question that comes from the audience, is about the secret sauce. So if there was one characteristic or common ingredient to successful multi-stakeholder partnerships, what would you say it would be? I need one word only. So across the board, Emily, including you as our keynote speaker, if you had one word that would be the secret sauce, what would you say it is? Anyone can jump in.
I can say start. Persistence.
Wait, say again, Mchiri.
Persistence. Or grit.
Interesting. Okay.
For me, it's commitment.
Yeah. For me, it's inclusivity.
For
Me,
me,
it's bravery.
oh, wait, say it again. I feel like I talked over you.
Sorry, I was saying bravery.
For me, I would say goodwill.
I'll add openness.
I'll also add visibility.
Oh, and I guess I should add a word. I'm gonna go with creativity. All right, so we're at 9:59. I want to say thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you so much to our audience for their amazing questions. I know we didn't get to all of them. We'll go back to the chat, and if there are any we can follow up on, we will try to. I know the platform is going to be open for some time, so we'll figure that out. But thanks so much for an interesting discussion. And I think there is no better way than to close this panel with these words that our panelists just shared with us around what it takes to form durable partnerships. So we have persistence, maybe a little greed, maybe I'll say hunger here too, commitment, bravery, goodwill, openness, visibility, and creativity. So thank you so much for joining us today, and look forward to hearing more about the partnerships that we all form to bridge the gender data gap. Thanks.